Okay, now we're going to import these objects into ZBrush, and we're going to talk about sculpting and making your sculpts look real. You don't want to just go in and start sculpting. You want to do some research first. You can look at Mesopotamian art. You can see the type of sculptures and rock formations as they age, how they kind of break apart. Egyptians have good stuff, Aztecs, Mayans. I want to talk about if you see two stones as they get older, they're going to shift, and one edge is going to shear off pieces like this, and they're going to get this pitting as they break off. And if you study where and how it kind of lays out, see it's more like the surface section because it had already been weakened by chiseling. Some pieces have been moved so much that big pieces broke off, but the overall smoothness seems to stay. It just gets rougher over time. It was probably polished like marble. We can learn a lot about how the surface is. We want to make sure that a lot of it stays sharp. Like this is from India. And you get a smooth surface, water running off of it, people walking over it. Same type of chips. And you get these type of patterns as pieces wear away. Harder sections give way to softer sections. And you want to spend some time actually studying this before you go in and start sculpting, because it will only get harder as you get into the sculpting process. All right, now we're going to go into ZBrush. Now we're going to import our mesh, and we're just going to go, your ZBrush will look like this when you start. I'm just going to go to Import, and I'm going to find my folder. High poly, trim sheet, max to ZBrush export. It's going to ask me some questions. I'm going to go to the bottom one. This is going to separate every single object into a separate subtool. Click and drag out by holding Shift to put the object there. Go up. I'm on solo mode, so yours will look more like this. This brick is the one that I'm going to duplicate here. Now on each one of these, I'm just going to go to Geometry. I'm just going to divide, and with Polyframe or Shift F, you'll see that I have, it looks like nothing's happened, like I don't have more geometry, but you can see my active points are 2,000, and overall I have 17,000. And if I adjust this, it seems to change nothing, but you can see that there's changes. If I hit Shift F, or this button again, you're going to see that I actually have geometry, just hasn't updated. I'm going to go to solo, and your buttons won't be in the same spot. I have mine for my tablet set up differently. I'm just going to hit solo, so I can only see this object. I'm going to turn off my lines, and I'm just going to sculpt and see if I can get fine enough details. Turn my intensity up. That's not good enough detail to start sculpting. So I'm just going to divide again. Still not. I want to use as low a detail as I possibly can as I'm starting. And I'm going to say 145,000 is probably enough to work on this singular brick. Now I want to damage the edges. There's a couple of ways that I can do that. This brush, the standard brush, isn't actually good for this type of work, because it's too smooth. I want a brush that's more flat. If I go to my brushes, I can click here, or I can press B to pull up my brushes, and if I hit C, it'll go to B, opens the brush menu, then the next letter opens a category. I'm going to go to C, and then if I go to B, I can find it here, Clay Buildup. This brush is all about flattening things out. Now this, as it's set now, is kind of, if you look at it, it's not round and smooth, it's square, but I want it to push in. So if I hold Alt, or if I click Sub, it'll press in. I'm just going to leave it on Sub, and I'm going to turn down its power, something like this. And I want to bust up these edges. I don't want to overdo it. And I can hold Shift to smooth stuff out. And if you notice that you're having a hard time getting an edge to disappear, you can just go in. I'm just going to Control Z back a little bit, lower my resolution, flatten it a bit, go up one, smooth it out, go up one, flatten it out. And now that section has less of this deformation, and I can just, if that's a problem, now this will work fine, but this strategy doesn't let me do a bunch of adjustments at the same time. I'm just going to Control Z back. And this object is also really thin to sculpt on. It's not a huge problem, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch it out, just to make it a little bit thicker. If I hold down Control and I click and drag, I can put a mask on an object. And if I press W, I can go to the Move tool. Now the Move tool is going to be in the center of the object. All of the objects. I'm just going to hold Alt and click to put it here. And I'm just going to pull it out. Now that, if you look at it, it's going to be stretching my geometry. If I hit Shift F, I'm going to be losing some of what's going on. So before I do this, I'm just going to hit Q to go back to edit. I'm just going to, with my mask selected, I'm just going to click. And that's going to blur my mask. W to get back to my Move tool. Stretch it out a bit more. Just make it a little thicker. Pressing Q to go back. Control, click and drag to turn the mask off. Now with it off, I have distorted some of these subtools, some of the geometry. I'm just going to go up to, I'm on 4, I'm going to say delete higher, and it's going to make 4 the highest subdivision. Just because as I stretch this out, it will stretch some of this geometry out. And I'm just going to add the geometry that I need again. And it'll just give me some of that resolution back on the side. That'll do. All right. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to my layers. And I'm holding Shift because if you don't hold Shift and you click, it'll close all your other shelves. And I just like to have geometry or subtool open all the time. I'm just going to add a new layer. And what this is going to let me do is go in and just bust up some edges. And I want to be kind of organic in how that I do it. I don't want it to be really heavy-handed because it's easy to do. Damage a corner. And hold Shift if you get too close to an edge. It's really easy to overdo this. Because I want to make sure the details look good, but they're not overly aggressive so that I can notice it tiling a lot. I'm also going to hit the other side because I can use this brick multiple times for other textures if I do this. Now, I'm going to say that while I wouldn't leave this normally, this is where I'm going to put it. Now I'm going to add another layer. And what's beneficial about this layering system is if I click here and I drag, I can undo my changes or turn down their opacity. I can also go the other direction, which is weird, but I can add another layer. And this layer, I'm going to press B for my brushes. I'm going to go to Gouge. So BG, and I just suggest writing these down, or is it dam? I'm going to go BD, dam standard. And this brush gives me a slice. and that's way too strong, so I'm going to turn down what it does, something like this, a little more. I'm just going to cut in, and I'm not going to make it wildly aggressive. I can press S to quickly change my brush size. And I want to make sure that these feel solid, like sharp, straight, depending on the material. And don't just do this by copying me. Look at the type of stone that you're working with so that you can see how the material fractures. That's the way that it breaks, because some things break straight, some things break in seams between the different parts. And now I'm going to do another layer, and this one I'm going to use alphas. I'm going to go B for brushes, S for standard, and then I'm going to press T, and that will give me my standard brush, my default. This brush is round and I don't like it for almost anything, but I'm going to click an alpha. I'm going to go to import, and I'm going to find myself a rock texture, so I'm just going to go to stone rock, find something maybe something like this, something that's got cracks and definition, and if I click S and I just start drawing, an alpha will just draw that, and that's not what I want. I'm just going to click here, stroke. This is how it draws the line out. I'm going to click here. I'm going to pull out. Now that's way too strong, so I'm just going to turn that down to like 4. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Just click the zoom button. I'm going to hit Alt so that it subtracts into it. And it'll project to the back side as well, but it'll be a different one. I think that's got some character. I think it's too strong, so I'm just going to click, turn it down, something like that. I'm going to turn off solo. I'm just going to go to my next object, Shift F to see the lines, Q, and I'm just going to do this to each of the sections of brick that I'm making. And once I'm done, like this brick, I'm just going to click on it, and I want to export this back to 3ds Max. I'm going to click Export. I'm going to name the brick something that I can find easily, and let's go to 3D, trim sheet, assets, and I suggest you label your folders like this. Assets are where you put all objects. Autoback, that's just for 3ds Max to find where to save its backup files. Images are anything that I'm going to use for references or that I'm not going to be adding to the final project. Maps, this is for finished final textures. This is project files for Max, just tells Max where to save everything. You don't have to worry about this one. Medium poly meshes, just a place to save meshes as I'm experimenting. Max saves, Substance Painter saves, and ZBrush saves. I'm going to go to Assets, and I'm just going to say these are high poly, and just name the stones, kind of what layer they're in, like strip, bottom brick. This is actually now high poly. And you're just going to hit save. And then we're going to take these after we've sculpted them, and we don't want to make one rock perfect. We're going to hold Alt and we're going to jump around to the different layers and just sculpt on them as we go, because if you stick and make one perfect rock, that's not good. You want to do slowly be building the entire piece up. And make sure that you've set a timer so that you don't get the entire project done.